Everybody, welcome to the STAR Voyage. This is a trip to the galaxy of effective review methods. So I am Jonathan. I'm your commander on this voyage. So please, if there's any issues, please contact me. We also have the admirals, and they're my supervisors, Associate Professor Jason Lodge and Louise Ainscroft. So this is part of my PhD research project, and my supervisors helped design this program as well. So thank you to them. Okay, so what's our mission today? What's the whole point of this workshop series? It's pretty simple. It's to help you use more effective review methods. So how are we going to achieve this mission success? First, we have a workshop today, which will be covering stuff like what are effective review methods and why do they work? And then in the second half of the session, we'll talk about how to actually use these techniques. So that's why I asked you guys to bring some of your learning material, and we'll actually get some hands-on experience on how to do these techniques. Then we have another workshop, and that is going to happen next week. So hopefully you should know those times. Let me know if you have to change times because we're running quite a few sessions next week. But essentially, during the workshops, I'll ask you to practice some of these techniques, just spending 5-10 minutes doing so. And then we'll talk about if you had any problems. We'll try to solve those problems. We'll also talk about how we can take what I talked about today to the next level and really master that, and basically some extra tips and tricks. And finally, we'll wrap up the second workshop with implementation tips. So how can you actually implement these techniques? How can you stay motivated? How can you manage your time? And I should mention that today's workshop is a bit more content heavy. I will be presenting for quite a bit, but the second workshop, I imagine, is going to be less content heavy. It's going to be more discussion focused. And then the final component of achieving mission success will be to complete these weekly check-ins after the workshops. Now, these are going to help evaluate the intervention to make sure it's working, but it's also probably more importantly, a tool to help you guys monitor your behavior. So if you're constantly aware of how you're studying and maybe you're studying ineffectively or you're achieving your study goals, that's going to help you maintain or improve your behavior. So the weekly check-ins will help with that. It also helps with goal setting. We'll just do a simple 5-minute activity. What are your goals for last week? Did you achieve your goals? What are your goals for next week? And how can you overcome any issues with achieving your goals? So just scaffolding that kind of goal setting process to help you guys, so you don't have to think too much about it yourselves, kind of just demonstrate how after this workshop series, you can do it by yourself. So heads up, there will be a quiz at the end of the session. So pay attention as much as you can. If you want, you can write down any notes. I will send the slides and a recording soon. So you also have that. So don't stress too much about writing down everything. There's really no drama there. But yeah, try to pay attention to the quiz, and you may get a prize if you participate in that. Okay, so I think we've already covered most of this. This kind of staff name, area of study, and why do you really want to learn to review effectively? I think we've already kind of covered name and area of study, but if we could just go around maybe the table and just discuss why you want to learn how to review effectively. So maybe, yeah, we'll just do it as a class. Maybe we'll start over here. So why review effectively? That's kind of the question just that I asked you guys. Here's some other reasons. Maybe some of them you've already mentioned, but obviously it can improve your grades, help you land a better job because of that, can save you time, be more efficient. And it can actually increase your enjoyment in the learning. That's the techniques I'm talking about today. If you frame it in a certain way, you can get enjoyment out of it. It can potentially reduce stress and help you become a master of your area, and help you become your actual chosen profession. So when I studied, eventually I figured actually I want to be a researcher. And using these techniques I'm talking about today have helped me achieve that by getting good grades and stuff like that. All right, so today we're talking about review strategies, but they're actually part of a broader galaxy of learning strategies. They're just one component. And I want to just briefly mention all the different types of learning strategies, just so that you have a good sense, and then I'll talk about what we're narrowing down on. So firstly, there's a category of strategies called motivational emotional strategies. So for example, rewarding yourself for doing a good job or for studying or listening to calming music to reduce your stress. So that's one category. Another category is behavioral, which is basically time management kind of stuff. There's also contextual learning strategies. These are strategies about monitoring and controlling your environment. So finding a quiet study environment. And then finally, there's cognitive study strategies. These are more about the actual learning process. So there are types of strategies like acquisition strategies, like note-taking, something that you do when you first acquire the material to try to encode it in your memory. And then we have review strategies. And review strategies are what you do to consolidate and remember and understand the material for long periods. And we'll actually be narrowing down the whole rest of the workshop on these review strategies because there's so much research out there that there are some strategies that are highly effective and work across all different degrees and different year levels. And they can get really good grades and they help you remember the material for long periods. But it is kind of important to keep in mind that, yes, okay, we're going to today and by the end of this series, you're going to really know how to review effectively. But to do that, you're also going to need to manage these other things. You're still going to need to be motivated. You're still going to need to manage your time. And workshop 2 next week, we'll kind of talk a bit more about these other strategies and how you can use them to review effectively. Okay, so we've talked a lot about, there's all these different learning strategies. We're going to narrow down on review strategies. What are they? Well, as I mentioned in the pre-survey, review is anything you do after you've watched a lecture once or read something once. So it's something that when you're going back to review or revise something that you've already been exposed to. So there's lots of different ways of doing that. So revisiting the learning material is a very common method. So reading your notes, rewatching lectures, or re-listening. Retrieval practice is another highly researched technique. That's basically taking a memory test on the material. Anything that gets the information out of your mind is active or retrieval practice. It also goes by the name of active recall or practice testing. It's simply just taking a memory test. Other techniques that I don't think I need to explain is summarization, mnemonics. Has anyone used mnemonics or does anyone know what that is? So in psychology, do you know what that is? Perfect, yeah. So that is mnemonic. And actually what I just got you to do was retrieval practice because I'm getting you to retrieve that information. Imagery is another technique. When you're learning something, you can attach an image to it in your mind. Self-explanation is when it's kind of like drawing a mind map. It's connecting the material to itself. And then there's highlighting as well. These are really popular commonly studied review strategies. There's also techniques about when to study. So I'm sure we've all heard of cramming. Cramming is just studying at an extended period instead of spacing, which is the opposite, is spreading the re-revision of the same material multiple times throughout the semester. So kind of what that looks like, spacing would be maybe you study something today, you have a week break, you study it again, have a week break, and you study it again. So this time you've reviewed the same material over a spaced period, right? And then there's cramming. Cramming would be, okay, you just re-review, instead of spacing it out, you bunch it all in 1 3-hour-long study session, typically the day before the exam, right? So these are the 2 different scheduling types of methods. Okay, so let's just talk about what actually you guys do. We'll use a finger method. So just put up your hand and just show me which one you use with it's a digit. So 1 for revisiting, 2 for retrieval, summarization. And we won't worry about these, just these. So yeah, hands up, show me what techniques you use the most. Yeah, and actually, that's a big problem with revisiting that we'll get to a bit later. But the survey research shows most students revisit. That's really the most common study strategy. Rereading notes is really what it's all about. Okay, what about spacing or cramming? So put your digit as 1 if you use spacing and 2 if you use cramming. Cramming, spacing. Okay, wow. And the research shows, they're almost the same distribution. Most students tend to use cramming, some students use spacing. Okay, so that's what you guys use. What do you think is most effective? So we'll use the same method and just choose one of these techniques. So again, if you think revisiting is the most effective, say 1, retrieval is 2, summarization is 3, and so on. So we have summarization, retrieval, and that's self-explanation. Cool. All right. Well, what if we had review papers that would actually look at this stuff and figure out what's the most effective? Well, luckily we do now. So in 2013, this is an uber famous paper, published in 2013, over 1,000 citations and 3,000 views. So it's an extremely popular paper, and it looks at what are the most effective review strategies. So it basically goes through what we just talked about, all those strategies, to figure out what works. And they didn't just look at, test performance for a certain amount of people. They looked at it across all the research, across all these different conditions, what techniques work, across materials, students, and different tasks. So they really want to find what techniques can generalize. If we're going to give students a technique to use for all your different courses, what should it be? And they assigned a rating or utility rating to every technique that they looked at. So there was 10 techniques they looked at, and then they assigned it a rating of low utility, medium utility, and high utility. So utility is just usefulness, right? And they said a technique is useful if it's highly effective, it works across all these different conditions. But not only that, it's also easy to use and it's easy to teach and implement. So it's not super useful if you have something that really, really works, but you have to train students like 20 hours to do it. So they want to look at, okay, what's really easy, effective, and useful. So this is what they found. And remember what you said before and see if it matches on what Dunlosky in 2013 found. So firstly, rereading or revisiting was a low utility rating, which maybe is no surprise. It has a benefit, but compared to other techniques, it's not as effective. Imagery use as well is pretty low. Highlighting and keyword mnemonic is low. Now, keyword mnemonic definitely has its use cases. Like, remember, you know what ocean is, right? You know those personality types. But why it's a low rating is you can't always come up with a good acronym for everything. So it has its uses, but it's not super useful. What else do we have? Summarization is also low. Again, it's useful, but it's actually a technique that requires a bit of training to get right. It's not super easy to use. Interleaved practice, we're not talking about today. Don't worry about it. Self-explanation, moderate as well. It has its use cases for sure. It's not always consistently better. And there's some techniques that are better that we're going to get to. Elaborative interrogation is just asking why questions, like why, problem solving, why does that work? That's a moderate usefulness. Okay, now we're getting to the high utility technique. So this is what I asked you before. See if it matches on what you thought was most useful. So maybe no surprise, but spacing is the first high useful technique. Consistently, spacing is much better than cramming it for long-term memory. And the other one is retrieval practice. Retrieval practice is another super high, super potent study strategy. It consistently outperforms other study strategies on learning tests. And often it's compared to the most popular technique, rereading or revisiting. It almost always beats out rereading. So I guess my job is done now. I can kind of walk out and you guys know how to study, right? Not quite, but I just want to show you some example findings. So that was a review paper and they looked at, hundreds of studies. But I just want to cherry pick some studies from that. So just so you can see some individual studies. So these authors compared practice tests to restudy across, a few experiments and conditions. But as you can see, the darker bars are always higher than the lighter bars. So this just demonstrates that retrieval practice or practice tests leads to better test performance. But yeah, that's just one study for retrieval practice. But there's many, there's hundreds of papers that show this effect. Spacing, I'll explain this to you. So this is portion correct. So the higher, the better. And students had, in this study, 6 study sessions, and then they had a final exam or final test. So and there was 3 conditions. So this is cramming, 0 days between sessions. This is spacing, 1 day between sessions. And this is spacing again with 30 days between sessions. And the take home here is that during the sessions, there was a variety of performance, but at the end, the best performing groups were those who spaced. The ones who crammed, you can see, had a lot lower grades. This paper is also really interesting. You might be wondering, oh, that's interesting. How come this group, who was performing so well in the study sessions, performed the worst? And that they talk about, and this isn't super important, but they basically talk about how when you're studying, your performance during your study is not necessarily reflective of how you're going to perform or learn at the end. So yeah, just be careful of that. Just realize if you're studying and everything's really working out, just be careful, because really what you want to do is give yourself a test, like a delayed test, maybe a week later, to see how well you're studying. But yeah, the take home here is that spacing beats out cramming. And this is just one study. Here was another study. Don't worry too much about what's going on. Just worry about it. This is cramming and these are spacing. And these are different types of spacing conditions, but what you can see is spacing again beats out cramming. And there's not just that one Dunlosky famous paper that I talked about. There's many, many other reviews of this stuff. So this review was published in Nature, Nature Reviews Psychology, highly reputable publication house. And they also conclude these techniques are highly effective. This paper in particular looks at the whole lifespan and wants to check, do these techniques work for elementary school, high school, university, and even beyond that in senior citizens. And yes, they do. These techniques consistently, they work across all the lifespan. And this paper is really good. If there is one paper you want to, if you're a bit nerdy or you're studying psychology, you want to get in the nitty-gritty in your research, pick up this paper. I think it's quite an easy read, and it'll just go through the research. Cool. And I think, these techniques, when you think about other areas of life, like you think about how you're going to learn how to play soccer or learn how to play music or learn how to drive a car, you don't think, oh, well, I'll just, revisit the video of how to play soccer. I'm just going to go to a soccer game and watch someone. You got to practice it. And it's exactly the same when you're studying. You got to practice remembering the material for it to really stick. And I think that's really intuitive. We know that for skill-based learning. But for some reason at university, everyone just thinks, maybe you should just read our notes for some reason. And we'll talk about why that is a bit later. There is a good reason why students think that. And another analogy is going to the gym in terms of spacing and cramming. Say you have a wedding coming up, you want to get really fit for the wedding. You're not going to achieve that by doing one 10-hour session the day before the wedding, right? It's going to take consistent performance weeks and weeks and weeks to gain that muscle. And that's really the same with studying. You can think of memory and learning as a bit of a muscle. You got to train it. You got to, got to kind of struggle and get a bit of pain, and then you can get the gains, right? No pain, no gains. Okay, maybe I'll just stop here and I'll just ask you guys if you have any questions, because I know I've been throwing content at you pretty fast. Do you have any questions about retrieval, about spacing? No? Okay, cool. How's my speed? Am I zooming too fast for you guys? Or? Okay, cool. All right, well, so that was all the research about retrieval and spacing. I also thought it'd be useful to actually hear from a student and their experience of using retrieval practice. So I'll show you a video now from Rebecca. She's a psych student. I think she's in third year, and she uses retrieval practice. So I just interviewed her last week, and yeah, you'll see what she says about it. So just turn that down. Oh, I just wanted to mention as well. So this program is called the STAR Voyage, and some of you have wondered, why have I called it that? Well, it stands for Study Techniques for Academic Results, but it also relates to space, right? Spacing is that highly effective technique, and stars are in space. So that's kind of the connection there. But actually goes one level further. It also stands for space timing and active recall, which are the techniques that we're talking about today. So space timing is spacing, and active recall is another name for retrieval. So I guess if you want to remember how to study effectively, just think you're a STAR student, so you've got to use space timing active recall. Okay, with that being said, let's watch this video of Rebecca.
Hi, my name is Rebecca, and I am studying psychology, and I'm a third-year student. Really excited about that. So the way I use retrieval practice in depth is that first step, I'll just watch the lecture, get down everything the lecture says, and lecture slides, whatnot, and that's done. Note taking is done. No more retaking of notes. I try to come up with questions, like very simple questions, not like the hard ones. It's just that, what did this theory say? And for example, what is the theory of what did Watson say for child development? And I'll just try and really think back, okay, what did my notes say? And I set a timer, so for 5 minutes, I'm just there thinking, okay, what did the notes say? I'm blurting out everything, writing it back down, recalling it. And when I'm satisfied with the answer, I stop the timer, whether it's finished or not. I go back to my notes. Anything that I miss out, that's where I'll do the same thing again, do the whole round of steps again. The reason why I use retrieval practice is I found that passive studying, like taking notes and just rewriting back the slides, was really boring and it was not engaging at all. My mind was somewhere else, but my hand was kind of moving. So I said, no, I need to find a better way to study and enjoy the studying process. And I found that active recall really helps me engage even with boring materials in the lecture. I find that with active recall, I'm like, okay, the question is, what is this theory? And I have to think like, okay, what did the lecture say? What did my notes say? So it's really stimulating and very engaging. So I feel like it's a bit of it lights a fire under me, active recall, because it makes me like, it kind of points out my flaws or like places where I still need to brush up. So I think that's the benefits for me. The biggest challenge for me when using active recall was the fact that it was daunting. I didn't want to, I always heard about it, but I never wanted to start using it because I'm like, it's so scary. I have to like blurt everything out and I can only go through the notes once. So I had to like, it took like barely passing a quiz for me to be like, no, I need to change my studying methods. So that's when I kind of overcame that anxiety and like that fear of trying out active recall. And when I tried it, I never looked back. So it was the best method for me so far. When I did like passive studying, my grades were like, it was pretty bad. Let's say if the quiz is like out of 10, I got like a 5. And I was not happy with it. I'm like, I'm spending so much time. Why am I only getting a 5? And when I tried active recall, like the first time I tried active recall, I managed to bump it up to like a 7.58. It wasn't 100%, that I'll have to say, but I did see a change. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start using this method because I do see some changes. Would I recommend active recall or retrieval practice? Yes, I would. Do it now, do it not later, do it now. Like, forget about like rewriting notes, rewriting slides. The slides there are already enough. Start active recall the moment you're done with the lecture, because I feel that active recall really stimulates your brain. It's kind of like very cost efficient, like in terms of time. If time is the cost, it's very cost efficient. Like you don't have to rewrite the notes, spend time making notes. It's just ask yourself questions. You don't know, go back to it. So active recall is a really efficient and good method with any kind of studying, especially when there's like a big exam coming up.
So thanks, Rebecca, for that. I'll turn back the star lights on. So is there any take homes from that anybody kind of resonated with or thought, okay, that's pretty useful? We'll get into the logistics a bit later, but yeah, hold on to those thoughts. Something else that kind of resonated with me, I've read a lot of the literature on this, but something that Rebecca said that surprised me is that how she found kind of passive learning, like rereading notes, going to the lecture, quite boring. The retrieval practice kind of, she said it lit a fire under her, it motivated her, gave her a bit of a challenge. And that is, you don't see that too much in the literature, but these retrieval practice can make it a bit fun. You can quiz yourself, make it a bit of a game show for yourself. You can reward yourself for doing well or just giving it a go. So I think active recall can be used in that way, or retrieval practice in that way, to keep things kind of fun.
They can like.
You already mentioned actually one of the benefits, but so why is retrieval practice effective? It's one of the most robust and consistent findings in all of the psychology literature that it is effective. It beats out rereading, but why? Why is it? Well, there's a few different reasons. First, it directly increases learning via effort. There's a line of class of theories that talk about the amount of effort to recall something, to really struggle to remember it, is what's driving the learning of that material. And a lot of students also will gain this benefit that it helps direct your learning. It helps you understand exactly your knowledge gaps, and it can help you understand, okay, well, I've completely forgot about that theory, so I must make sure to study that. And you might go, well, I know that other theory very well, so I don't have to focus too much of my time on it. So I think a lot of students, they realize that testing yourself helps you figure out and understand your learning. What's probably not as well known is that it actually, taking a memory test actually improves your memory just by doing the test, which is kind of a weird finding, but it's a very consistent finding. And yeah, it's because of that effort. That seems to be the reason. There's also another benefit, and Rebecca talked about this. It can increase your enjoyment and it can reduce your stress. So there's research out there about, test anxiety, and using these techniques can improve your stress or reduce your anxiety. And I think part of that is like it builds your confidence and you know the material. If someone quizzes you on the lecture, you can answer everything quite confidently. Going into the test, you're going to just feel a bit less stressed probably. But I guess the real take home is it's really the effort. And that means when you are trying retrieval practice, don't give up too easily. Like really struggle. Like Rebecca said, she sets sometimes a 5-minute timer. She really tries to remember it and she really struggles. And I think by struggling as well, and then you see the answer, if you've forgotten the answer, that answer is now a lot more memorable because you've really struggled. Opposed to just reading it in your notes. I think one of you alluded to this. When you just read something in your notes, it's very familiar. It's like, yeah, I remember that theory. Yeah, the lecturer talked about that. Yeah, I've got this. And yeah, this is kind of a bit of an illusion. Okay, so why is spacing effective? So firstly, it reduces forgetting compared to cramming. So just repeating the same information at different times is a very, it combats forgetting or improves memory. And the reason for that, the researchers think there's a few theories. One is that it increases your attention. So you can imagine if you're cramming for 3 hours and you've seen the same material maybe 5 times, every time you see it, you might just pay a bit less attention to it because it's not so new and you've already seen it so many times. So that's one reason. And another reason is it might increase the memory cues. So if you've kind of studied here today and then you study at home and then you study at the library, researchers think that your memory of the learning material is kind of mixed with the memory of being in that space. So when you go to retrieve it, your memory has all these other things that it can link to, and it can go, oh yeah, I was at home and then there and kind of consolidates that in your memory. Does that make sense? Yeah, there's research on that as well. Context dependent learning. Yeah, it's pretty funny. That's not like, don't worry too much about the theory. Like, you don't need to understand the theory. What you need to understand is that these techniques, they work, and there's a lot of evidence. We don't really know exactly like why. It could all be multiple theories working together. So yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily vary it up too much. Basically, probably what I would suggest, because of that context-dependent learning, is studying a similar space to where your final exam will be. Similar conditions, so quiet, maybe just by yourself, no music. Maybe towards the end, try to replicate that exam experience. But the main thing here is it reduces forgetting. Okay, and you might be wondering, there's all this research about retrieval and spacing being effective, but why are students, there's survey research suggesting they revisit the material and they reread and they rewatch. So it's easier. That's actually the reason. Exactly. That's the answer. It's easy. And researchers think, well, what we understand is that you interpret that ease as being good learning. So if something's easy and it's fluent, you think that's good. So I'll give you an analogy. So imagine you're watching this like David Attenborough documentary. It's well produced, it's super fluent, his voice is super smooth, and it's amazing. It's all about nature. And you think, yeah, I've learned so much about like the Amazon rainforest now, I'm like an expert. And then, you're at the dinner table and you're talking, to your friends and your family, and they say, oh yeah, how was that documentary? What did you learn about? And you actually can't recall as much as you think you could. And that's because, yeah, it was so fluent that it tricked you to thinking you were learning. But learning, unfortunately, kind of requires a bit of effort and struggle. And the same thing with cramming. Cramming kind of feels easy. In the cramming session, yeah, you can remember the material because you've just seen it. So that kind of leads people into this illusion of learning. So yeah, don't be tricked by this illusion of learning that you get from rereading and rewatching. It's an illusion. You're not actually learning that well compared to other techniques. and same with cramming. So difficulty in learning can actually be desirable. And researchers call the techniques that I'm talking about today as desirable difficulties. They make learning feel a bit difficult, but they actually have long-term gains. Just like in the gym, right? If you're working out and you go home from the gym and a few days later, you're not feeling any pain or anything. It wasn't a hard workout session. It was super easy. You didn't even sweat. It's probably not very desirable. Sometimes you need a bit of pain for gain. Yeah. And another little thing I want to mention that's evidence-based, but it's a bit of a motivational thing, is that intelligence isn't fixed. Effort actually matters, right? So maybe you're not the world's best like soccer player just naturally, you don't have the genes for it, you don't feel like you have that ability, but you can get good by practicing, right? If you practice every week consistently and you're doing harder drills, you're failing, you're making mistakes, you're fixing them, you're getting feedback, you're going to perform better. So effort really matters in learning, and don't be fooled by thinking, oh, I'm just not smart enough to get this content. You are smart enough, you can do this, just put in the effort. Yeah, you got this, guys. Okay, so before I move on, do we have any questions? We will talk more about exactly how to implement these techniques in the next section. But any other questions besides that? All pretty good. Is anyone skeptical about these techniques? Or are you convinced? Yeah? You're not sure, maybe? Or... Yeah, you got to give it a go. Yeah, that's fair enough. That's fair enough.
I've seen heaps around using palm cards for this, or
flashcard, palm card.
Yeah, there's a flashcard system where you have like 5 or 6 piles, and one that you got right, you put on the next pile, or like 2 piles away, so you review it in 2 weeks. But something you got wrong, you put on the next pile, so you review next week. So the more things that you get right, the further away you space the learning, and the more things you get wrong, the sooner you review them. So you're reviewing what you don't understand more than what you already do understand, but it's spacing it out in
Beautiful. Yeah, I think it's called the Lightner system. Or
something, yeah.
Something like that, some German name. Yeah, that's a really, really good system.
I think if anything, this has highlighted that all that time that I spend note taking that I barely read over might be so much better of me using palm cards or using flashcards that I write out and I have answers on the back sort of thing, so I can have those tests and those recalls, even though I'm like, oh, but then I'll throw the palm cards down and it won't be as worthwhile. It's like, yeah, but you've got the knowledge now.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't need the material to refer back to.
Perfect. Thank you. That's what I like to hear. All right. We're doing pretty good for time. So do you guys want to have a 5-minute break? How are you feeling? 5-minute break, thumbs up. Yeah, okay. We'll do a 5-minute break. Eat some snacks, go to the toilet, grab a drink. Feel free to, stay here as well. I'll put on some study music, so it's a bit less boring than just white noise. We might move on now, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed that break. Feel free to keep snacking. Okay, so in the last session, as you would know, we've established retrieval practice and spacing are effective. So in this session, it's going to be the next hour is mainly focused on how to actually apply these techniques now. Now, firstly, I think some of you already mentioned you kind of use retrieval practice. I think you've already mentioned you kind of create flashcards. Was that right? All right, so I'm going to talk about only 3 ways of using retrieval today mainly, but there are lots of different methods. Again, it's all about taking a memory test. It's all about putting in an effort to try to remember the material. And these are some quick ways of doing that. So brain dump is one method. You just simply start with a piece of paper or a Word document, and you just try to write down everything you can remember about a topic. So this, it doesn't require extra material. You don't have to create any questions or anything. It's just, what can I remember? Now this is pretty daunting because then you realize, oh, I don't remember anything. So I suggest maybe doing this maybe towards the end of your learning process, maybe towards the exam, to really drive home what you remember. But in between kind of studying from now until the exam, you probably want to use other techniques like cover, recall, and check. So here you might have your notes about the occipital lobe, the part of the brain that is all about visual processing. So those are your notes, and you want to do some retrieval practice. So we know most students are reading their notes over and over again. So how can you turn just rereading into retrieval? Simply, instead of reading the content, just hide the content. So you maybe read the title, occipital lobe, and you just ask yourself, okay, what do I know about the occipital lobe? What are its functions? Where is it located? And you just spend a few minutes or, 30 seconds trying to remember that. And then obviously just uncover the material and check. Well, yeah, flashcards are the next technique we're going to talk about. And I think flashcards are really great. The problem is sometimes students don't have enough time to create the material. So depending on how much time you have, if you're really short on time and you already have notes, or maybe you don't even have the notes, but you have the lecture slide, you can just use the strategy. I mean, you don't even have to cover anything. Like, as long as you just don't cheat, and you just see the symbol and then you just spend that time, that effort to remember, that will be good. And then, yeah, you just check your answer. And then, yeah, the final strategy, the other pro tip I want to mention is what I used to do and what I figured out in undergrad is I really wanted to use flashcards, but I never had the time. So what I did instead is a bit of a more quicker way of doing stuff is you can write the question as, you can write the title in your notes or the heading as a question. So instead of just writing occipital lobe, you can write what is the location and the function of the occipital lobe. And that way, when you inevitably reread your notes, because that's just what a lot of people do, you see a question, you're prompted to do a retrieval practice. You don't even have to think, it's just automatic. Yeah, so that's probably the most efficient way of using a retrieval practice I found, is most people take notes, lecture notes anyway, so you might as well just turn your notes into questions and answer format. And that kind of solves the issue that you were talking about. It's like, how do I connect all the questions together? It's because now you don't even have to do any more extra effort. It's all in a question answer format, and you just go through your notes from top to bottom, answering your questions. And yeah, if you have a bit more time and you're a bit more organized, you can use flashcards. So there's apps like Quizlet that you can use flashcards. There's other apps that we'll talk about, but I think flashcards are probably the best. I think they're a bit more fun as well, and you can randomize things, and they're a bit more engaging. So a flashcard is obviously on one side of the card. You have the question, and then the other side you have the answer. So this is a question maybe you might learn in political science, and then you want to check the answer. So obviously first you ask yourself the question, you spend a minute trying to remember it, and then you go, okay, I can't remember. What's the answer? This is a flashcard, so you'll just click on it. I'm sure you all know how flashcards work, but yeah, then you see the other side of that. So it's a really simple strategy, but also, again, it kind of prevents you from cheating, because sometimes if you're using that note strategy where you have questions and answers, you kind of cheat. But you can also use paper versions of that. So depending on what you like, some people really like the physicality of flashcards. And then you can do that system that you were talking about where you categorize the flashcards into how well you know them. And if you don't know something very well, maybe you revisit it more. But if you get it accurate and you're very confident that you know it, then maybe you leave it a few weeks and you do that spacing. All right. So before we get into some practice of actually using a retrieval practice, just a few simple tips. So first, generally, you kind of want to understand the material before you kind of write a question about it or before you do retrieval practice. So don't just try to memorize things rote. It's much better that you actually understand the theory. That'll be more encoded in your memory. Now, sometimes you don't actually understand it, so you just have to memorize it, and that's fine. And then sometimes through that memorization process, then you actually start to understand it. But generally, it's a good process. If you can understand it, do that first. Always follow up retrieval practice with checking your answers. Yeah, that feedback process takes retrieval practice and gives it even more of a benefit. And also start easy or incorporate some easy questions in there, because retrieval practice can be a bit hard sometimes. It can feel difficult, especially if you're getting things wrong. So I always like to start off with a few questions that I know I'm going to get right. Keeps me motivated. And then throughout the study session, I'll just chuck in a few easy questions. That's just a little trick to keep you motivated. So yeah, there are lots of apps. If you're not into physical flashcards, or you want to carry your flashcards around you and you want to do them on the bus or something like that, definitely apps like Quizlet are great. My actual recommendation, that's a new tool, is called RemNote. And RemNote's really good because you can actually it's a note-taking software, but you can turn your notes into flashcards very easily. So for example, here, the author just wrote a question, and you just press the button, and now this side is the answer. And then in the system, you can just press flashcards, and it'll pop up the flashcard like that, and you have to try to recall the answer. So why I think this is a really great tool is that, pretty much everyone is taking notes. So you might as well, because the problem is you take notes and then you have to spend time creating flashcards. It can be a long process. RemNote kind of couples that together, makes the process way more efficient. I think it's free. Yeah, there's definitely a free version. That's really good. There is a paid version. I think it includes extra features like PDF reading, which is not very useful. But yeah, I think very similar to OneNote. It's just kind of think of it like OneNote plus in flashcards. So let me just see if I can give you a quick demo of that. RemNote is actually what I use in my PhD and what I use for my own learning. So it's a tool I highly recommend. Let me see if I can quickly show you RemNote. But yeah, this is RemNote, so it's really easy to create a flashcard. So you might go, what are the 2 most effective study techniques? Then you just simply press like the arrow key, and then you have the flashcard, and it has AI as well now. And yeah, there's the answer. So now you've got your question, and when it's time to practice it, you can just click flashcards up here, and there's your flashcard. So what are the 2 most effective study techniques? I think we should all know this by now. Do you want to say it? Spacing and retrieval practice or active recall. So yeah, you obviously answer that. Try to put in the effort to try to remember it, and then you check, okay, oh yeah, space, repetition, active recall. And yeah, then you can basically assign how well you know the material. So if it's easily recalled, you'll see it in 4 days. So it has inbuilt spacing. And that's why I really like these flashcard tools. Quizlet has it as well. I think there's a mode which has spacing. I'm not sure how to get it. RemNote, Anki is another popular one. They all have this spacing algorithm. So you don't have to figure it out yourself. When should I see the next, when should I revisit this? Quizlet's really good with that too. Because Quizlet, you'll actually find people like in psychology at UQ like 2 years ago would have created a deck. So Quizlet's good for that. RemNote's starting to also do that collaborative, but there's all these different apps. My preferred one is RemNote, but definitely figure out what works for you, or maybe just use physical flashcards. As long as it doesn't really matter what tool you're using, as long as you're doing the retrieval process. Yeah, give it a go. So in between this workshop and the next, I'm going to challenge you guys to use one of these techniques. So maybe just use RemNote and see how you go with that or similar software. But yeah, so we've talked about these are the 3 ways. There's many other ways, such as, as you mentioned, asking your friend or getting your partner to test yourself, or, or teach the material to some stranger. People hated me in undergrad because I used to always tell them about psychology and everyone was sick of it. But that's a really good way of using retrieval, at the dinner table. This is what I learned today. That's, as long as you're not using your notes, it's a type of retrieval. You can also use generative AI. So maybe you just chuck your notes in and you say, create a list of questions for me and answers. And then, or I'm not even sure you can do this, but you can probably ask it to just quiz you, maybe. Have you tried that before? Yeah, so will it just give you a question? Yeah, it's a pretty powerful tool. So yeah, definitely it can help out with studying as well. All right, now it's over to, I think, what a lot of you guys have been waiting for is that practice. So we're going to spend now 5 or 10 minutes trying out retrieval practice first. We're just going to focus on retrieval. So yeah, you can try one of these methods, brain dumping, covering your notes, checking and recalling, and answering flashcards. I have some physical flashcards here, which you can try, mate, with you. Here you go. You can also, feel free to use this time to explore for an app if you want. If you're having any issues, let me know. This is a time really to work through any problems you have. Also, I did want to mention before we do spacing, how did it feel to do retrieval practice? Maybe from this table, how did you guys feel? Was it easy? Did you find that as an easy process, difficult process? It can be a fun process, a challenging process, which is really nice. How did you guys feel about retrieving, especially maybe something that you got wrong? How did that feel? Yeah, well, that's what I was expecting for you guys to say was it felt hard. But actually, yeah, it can feel enjoyable. And I use retrieval practice in my own studies in my undergrad. I enjoyed it a lot. But there will be times where it does feel difficult and will feel a bit challenging for new content. What I recommend is just persevere through that pain, because just that struggle can even have a learning benefit. Even if you don't know the material, but you're really struggling, like you said, once you see the answer, it starts, you go, I need to know that answer. I'm going to remember it now. Sorry guys, I'm just moving on to spacing now. So we'll get some more time to talk and the practice in a set. But just before we do that, I'm just talking about spacing. So there's a couple of ways that you can use spacing. One way is manually, which is definitely one way of doing it. So you might have, to do this, you might create a table. You know, you want to study 6 weeks towards the exam. And you might write down all your topics on one column. And then you just go through the topics and you figure out what's easy and what's hard. And based on that easiness, you assign when you're going to review. So this is topic A. It's quite easy for you. So maybe you'll visit in 3 weeks' time. And again, in 3 weeks' time. So you're getting the spacing in there that you're not cramming it all at week 6. You're spacing it out. You're revisiting it multiple times. Remember, spacing is not just having different study sessions. It's actually revisiting the same material, the exact same material multiple times, which I think a lot of people don't might not realize. So maybe topic B, it's kind of medium difficulty for you. So you review it a bit more. And topic C is really hard for you. You're really not understanding it. So you're going to review it every week, for example. Now you might go, as you're going along with study topic C, it might become easier. So you might actually drop some of these review sessions as you go. But just as a plan at the beginning, you want to say, I'll review it every week until, it's easier. And the other way to do it is to use software. So like Quizlet, Anki. Exactly right. So in this system and a lot of the systems, if you really know this answer, I think we should all know what the function of the mitochondria is. It's the powerhouse of the cell, as everyone should know. There's a meme on it. But yeah, if you easily recall it, then you'll see that in 4 days' time. In 4 days' time, it's still really easy for you, then that number becomes 1 week. And in 1 week's time after that, it becomes 3 weeks, and then 1 month, and then 1 year, and then 5 years. So the idea is you'll see it eventually, because everyone forgets things. That's just natural. But sometimes if you know something really well, you don't need to see it for a long time. So yeah, my recommendation would be to use software if you can. Yeah, it just automates that process for you. You don't have to think about it. There's an algorithm behind it. So that was if you recall it easily. But obviously, if you've forgotten it, you're going to see it again pretty soon. So you might see it today, and then the next day and the next day, until you kind of start to get it. And this 100% works. I use it all the time for myself. I'm trying to improve my vocabulary and stuff like that. And 100% at the beginning, I keep forgetting the word, but I see it every few days. And I'm like, by now, it's just instantly, if someone says the word, I know what it means. It's the same with like concepts and more complex material as well.
This is
RemNote. This is RemNote. Anki is another popular one, which this is based on. And it has the same thing. It will give you the times as well. Which I think is really cool. And it kind of makes it a bit of a fun game as well. Just trying to assess, how well you know things. And there's emojis as well, which I think you guys know I love emojis. So, all right. Now we're going to practice spacing just for 5 minutes. So we'll do this maybe in the groups. And remember, spacing is just going over the same material that you've seen before or reviewed before. So there was a bit of a break that I was presenting. So that's actually a period. Now we can do spacing. So you can go over the same material that you just quizzed yourself on. Ask each other the exact same questions and see how well you can now recall that information. And that is just simply spacing. Now, generally spacing, you might need days or weeks to do it, but you can do it in short periods as well, especially if you're not understanding something. So maybe if there was a particular question that you got wrong, maybe revisit that question now. And we'll do this just 5 minutes, maybe this will be a speed round. Any questions before on how to do spacing? Before we go, we'll do a quick quiz, but before we do that, I just want to give you a challenge. So next week, you'll have your second workshop, which will be a less content heavy, more discussion focused. But my challenge between the workshops is to apply retrieval practice 5 times. So what I mean by that is just ask yourself 5 questions about, some material that you've kind of never reviewed before. So that's a pretty low bar. So hopefully you guys can all match that, but it's a challenge. So you don't get the time to do it. It's all good. And then the other challenge is to apply spacing 5 times. So to do that, just look at material you've already reviewed before, maybe from today, and go over it again. Remember, spacing is just repeating. It's just a repetition of the practice. Maybe you can actually combine this together. So maybe one day you'll do 5 pieces of never reviewed knowledge before, and then the next day you just repeat that. And so you've done that spacing. So that's my challenge. My bonus challenge, which some of you guys have actually already achieved, is to try space repetition software like RemNote or explore some tools. Even if maybe it could be just maybe go buy some paper flashcards because that's the tool that you like. But yeah, that's just my bonus challenge. So see how you go. Yeah, maybe you want to take a photo of that slide, just so you remember, or write it down or something. You will get the slides eventually. I'm just not. All right, now we're going to do a little retrieval practice quiz about today's content. So if you can please go to this link, joinmyquiz.com, and then you can type, you'll get a pre-made name, but then if you can type in this code and let me know, just give me a thumbs up once you do all on their website. Yeah, okay, cool. So we got wasabi, we got lettuce, we got mango, pineapple, tamarello, and all these, like there's no time pressure on these questions. So I know the music's very frustrating. So first question, what are the most effective learning techniques? If there's one thing that you take home from today, that this is it. And I think it gives you, if you got it correct as well on your screen, which is really cool. How did we all go? Yeah, we all scored 600 points, which I think means we all got it accurate. So yes, retrieval practice and spacing, the research shows that's the most effective techniques. It definitely beats out cramming and revisiting the material. They're not just the most useful, they're also very, sorry, they're also very useful, not just effective. Okay, question 2. Why is retrieval practice effective? So this is a bit of a harder question now. And take your time, there's no rush. Okay, why is retrieval practice effective? There was one slide on this. This was the slide. So it directly increases your learning, and that's through effort. Remember, it's all about that struggle. It also can help direct your learning, helps you understand what you do and you don't know, and it can reduce your stress and increase enjoyment. And I think a lot of you guys actually experienced that using retrieval practice today. It actually is kind of fun challenging yourself. Let's see what you guys said though. What do we have? Okay, uses the concept of effort. Yes. Directly improves learning, forces cognitive learning. Yes. Helps you remember faster and better. Needs a lot of left, but it's worth it. Yes. So it can take a lot of effort, but the struggle, the difficulty is good. Consolidates learning, puts it into long-term memory. Yes. The reason though, I'm looking for the reason, which is the effort. That's like the big thing here. It's like it's that struggle to remember that drives your memory. Because it means you need to actively use your memory to recall your answers. Yes, this allows you to get feedback. Yeah, the feedback process is also really important. Yeah, and by actively recalling, often you grow your understanding of long-term memory of topics. Really good job, guys. All right, let's see the next question. And you can see these are all retrieval questions, right? So some of them are multiple choice, like you mentioned earlier. Can you do that? Yeah, you can. You can use multiple choice, true and false, or you can just do open-ended questions like this question was. These are the least effort to create. And the research, I think, is kind of leans towards complete open-ended questions being best. Because if you do a multiple choice quiz, it kind of gives you a bit of a clue. So you don't have to rely too much. Yeah, exactly. So it kind of makes it a bit easier. So I would just stick with completely open-ended if I was you guys. All right, next question. Why is spacing effective? Nice. Again, this was a bit of a harder question. So thanks for trying to retrieve it. So there was one slide on this. So yeah, it reduces your forgetting. And the theory suggests maybe this is because it increases your attention or it increases the memory cues. So if you're studying lots of different places, you have all this other memory associated with your material, and that helps your brain basically find the material when you're trying to recall it. Let's see what you guys said. So why is spacing effective? Long-term memory, yes. More effective than cramming as you're able to remember information effectively in the long term. Exactly right. It enhances memory cues by creating added association with the study environment to the content learned. Oh yeah, I really like the wording of that. Maybe I'll use that in my next workshop. It gives you the time to memorize your course and finding difficult areas to work on them. Yeah, that's exactly right. Although I would say maybe that's a bit more to do with retrieval, because retrieval gives you that feedback on what's right or wrong. But often when you're spacing, you should be coupling that with retrieval. So it kind of is right. Okay, and the last one is why is spacing effective? By going back to review your content at timed intervals, increases the amount you're seeing and recalling the info. Yeah, that's basically it. It's that revisiting of the material is preventing forgetting. You can also space longer when your understanding is higher and decrease the spacing to focus more on areas you need more understanding in. Yes, perfect answer. All right, next question. Why might learners prefer revisiting and cramming? All done. Okay. So hopefully you should see the answer on your screen if it was right or wrong. Okay. Well, I think everyone got that right. So 2,400 points you all have now. It's amazing. Okay. So why learners might prefer revisiting and cramming? Because it feels easy. Does anyone want to maybe explain why it feels easy? Perfect. Exactly. Cool. And remember, don't fall for that illusion of learning. It is a trap and we all kind of fall into it a bit. But remember, just something feels easy doesn't mean it's actually working. Just like maybe if you go to the gym, you might feel like it's so easy. My workout session's so good. Obviously, you need a bit of pain to have some gains. All right, next question. Difficulty can be desirable in learning. I think it's true or false, is it? Yeah. This is very much linked to the last question. Nice, nice. So difficulty can be desirable in learning. True or false? 3,000 points. Everyone gets that right. Yes, difficulty can be desirable in learning. In fact, researchers call retrieval practice and spacing, they call them desirable difficulties. So they're making the learning feel difficult, but it has that benefit in the end. Next question is, what are the 3 ways you can use retrieval practice? There was a slide with the 3 ways, or you can mention other ways. Okay, so the slide that I had about this, we talked about brain dumping is one way that you can retrieval practice. Maybe just you start with a blank piece of paper and you write everything you can about a topic, and then you check, obviously, if that was right. We talked about the cover, recall, and check method. Simply just get your notes that you've already created and cover it and just try to recall what's underneath it. And then, yeah, answering flashcards is, if you have the most time, definitely one of the best ways to use retrieval, because it also, a lot of these apps have spacing inbuilt. So good job. Let's have a look what you said. Brain dumping, cover, recall, check, flashcards. Yes. Brain dumping, recalling cards. Yes. Brain dumping, covering notes and testing. Yes. Okay. Flashcards, brain dump, cover and call. Flashcard, spacing, cover and call. Yep. That's pretty good, guys. I mean, obviously, a few of you have forgotten. As long as you have one method, right? As long as you have your preferred method, that's all that matters. So it's really good. Okay, next question is, how can you use spacing? There was 2 things I talked about. If you can just mention one, that would be good. All done. So 2 things that I mentioned for using spacing is you can create a schedule, creating that table with all your topics and the weeks and figuring out based on how easy or difficult something is, when you're going to schedule it. The other thing you can do is just using space repetition software like Remnote, Anki, Quizlet. All these flashcard apps generally have this spacing inbuilt. Okay, let's see who got that accurate. Spacing easier topics further apart than harder ones. Yes. reviewing 1 week, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. Yep, that's that expanded retrieval method. Spreading out the information needed to learn. Example, if you got a question wrong, learn it again in 5 minutes. Perfect. Difficulty ones do more often, yes. And study concepts with spaces between studying sessions, depending on how complex the concept is to understand. Yeah, perfect. Good job. Okay. So this isn't really a quiz question, it's just out of my interest. Who will actually take on board the challenge to use retrieval and use spacing 5 times this week? And let's be honest here. I think we're waiting on one more person. Perfect. Yes, we're all going to challenge ourselves. Thank you, guys. I did have someone in the last session actually said, no, they're still thinking about it, which is fine, which is good. And we talked about the reasons why still thinking about it. But yeah, that's awesome that you're all going to challenge yourself. Oh, interested to see how you go. But like with behavior change, this is essentially a behavior change. You kind of have to plan a bit to do it. So my next question is all about that. So next question is, when are you going to do the challenge and how will you stick to it? So I want you to be specific. You know, for example, I will do this on Tuesday between my lectures in my break. And how am I going to stick to it? I'm going to use a reminder, for example, on my phone. Be as specific as you can. Nice. Thank you guys for doing that. So what did you say? This was my example, which I already went through, but yeah. So after my lectures, use my calendar to remind me to do it. I love using calendar reminders. My whole life's scheduled around calendars, and also like Google reminders. I'm constantly reminding myself. In fact, just at 5 o'clock, my phone pinged me to go to the gym. So we'll only be a couple of minutes. So if you can stick around, that would be good. But yeah, I plan to go home, find a program to handwrite flashcards. I think I know who that one is. On Friday, I will turn 3 weeks of content into quiz review, flashcards, and review every day. Perfect. I like how you specifically mentioned the days there. That's really cool. I'll start the process this week and then maintain the behavior by applying it each week. That's really good. This week and next, flashcards as per my time planner. Perfect. Using a time planner is great. I have a test next week, so I'm motivated to do it and will remember. I'll practice it with 1 course, 1 lecture. Perfect. Good job, guys. With these as well, like it's more specific, you're better. So if you can say specifically on a day, that's even really good, or tie it to another behavior. Like, okay, on the bus to uni on Tuesday, I'm going to go through my flashcards on my phone. So be really specific, because some of these they're good, but they're a bit general. So like I'm trying to go to the gym. If I just say to myself, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week, I tend not to go. But if I say, okay, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I'm going to the gym, I've told myself that I'm going to be accountable, then that seems to work a bit better. Okay, I think one more question related. So, this I'm going to hide the answers to, but this is just some feedback. Ooh, for me, no time limit on this is really important. Sorry, let me just fix this up. It's really important, yeah, you just give me accurate feedback on what you liked about today's session, because this is a research project, so this will be useful for the next time someone runs these sessions, maybe in America or somewhere, to know what to continue doing. And the next question will be about critical feedback, but this is just focused on positive things. So yeah, take your time for this one. Please don't rush it. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate that feedback. Very useful. Okay, the next question is the opposite. So it'll be, what can be improved about today's session? So this is obviously always looking to improve, and I'll probably run another iteration of this workshop next year or later in this semester. So again, just have a good think about what can be improved about this session. If there's nothing that you can think of, you can say that as well. But yeah, again, unlimited time, so it'd be very useful to hear what you think. I think we're just waiting on one more person. Thanks. Oh. It's all good. Take your time. Thank you. Awesome, guys. Thanks for that feedback. It's really going to help. The last 2 questions is just your student number and your email. Now, if you want your feedback to be private, then you just put in just random words. But if you don't mind, then please, that'd be great. Yeah, the next question is just your email. If you already submitted your email, then Don't worry about it. Thank you guys. Awesome. But yeah, that really wraps it up. Thank you for participating. I hope you took something nice away from today. And yeah, remember to attempt the next study strategy, the retrieval practice and spacing before next session if you can. And yeah, please email me if there's any questions or issues you have, or you need to change your session for next week.